It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Grind Line here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator. As always, joined in by my defense partner, Devin Little. Devin, how's it going this week? Hockey season, we're getting closer and closer. We're at almost towards the beginning of August. We're still in the dog days of summer, that is, but not much news. Again, no news, no Joe Veleno news. Unfortunately, we don't have that to talk about. We do have our defense and goaltending lineups to talk to discuss, and then we also have a new segment starting. It's going to run for the next few weeks. So how's it going this week?
Yeah, pretty excited to get the ball rolling on this one. We kind of jam-packed, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been good. Been a pretty good week. Excited to do this with you again. Hopefully this episode turns out well.
Yes, but we got just right off the bat, I want to thank Paradox Destroyer for his question that kind of spurred this new segment we're going to start. So thanks for that, inspiring us for our show. So keep it going, because we always love the feedback and love the suggestions to make this show even better than it is. So thanks so much, Paradox Destroyer, who's been here probably from the beginning. He's been a big part of this the comment section. So shout out to him right off the bat here. But before we get to all that, let's get to our first segment, one good, one bad, as we always like to kick off our show. Devin, what's a good and a bad from this past week?
My one good is that throwback to last year. Black Cherry Verner's is back on the shelves here in Michigan, and as you saw, I had to make sure I got some. So good time over here at my place. My one bad is gonna be you could probably spin this as a one good, but I'm gonna say it's a bad. The Vladimir Tarasenko deal in Ottawa. The reason why I say it's bad is because it's 1 year. I think that it's a good, I think that effectively replaces DeBrincat in their lineup, especially combined with Kubalik. But also if they were looking for someone to actually stick around, that's kind of what they wanted DeBrincat to do. A 1 year deal is definitely not that. So maybe we'll be talking about Ottawa needing to fill that void again a year from now, because Tarasenko only signed a 1 year deal. But this is a Red Wings show, not a Senators show.
I'll run the starting with the bad before the good, but just to run off that, the Senators got better.
There you go. Yeah.
Adding Tarasenko, that's a bona fide 20, at least. Even in his career right now, he's still a 20 goal scorer. You're probably going to get 20 goals out of him. He could even get more depending on chemistry. I mean, we hit some good chemistry with Stützle, or in the first and second lines, top six. So they got better. I don't know if they got phenomenally better, but I mean, Tarasenko's still a legitimate sniper to play on that team. So that's a bad, makes it a little tougher for the Red Wings to make the playoffs, and it was going to be tough in the first place. But the Senators getting that much better, and then DeBrincat getting added to maybe it's a wash. Who knows? I mean, maybe it's been, now that they replaced DeBrincat, it's kind of, now they're kind of even. So maybe that's also a good. So I kind of doing the same thing. So for my good is that hockey season is that much closer, because we keep going through the off season, and you start looking and seeing more line combination forecasting. You're starting to see a lot more maybe preview articles starting to come out. So that just gets the ball rolling. We start getting more excited. So but there's still a month and a half before preseason. So there's still a ways to go. But every day is getting closer. So.
It's gonna be a long August.
I'm not looking forward to the cold weather, so I don't want it to go as fast. It's nice being in the sun and the warmth, so I don't want it to go too quick, but hockey season is great when it does come. All right, well, speaking of lineup predictions and projections, let's get to our second half of our discussion and talking about the defense and goaltending. This is gonna be a quicker discussion. It's not as many players. And but let's start with the defense and the top pairing. We'll just go through them all in one here. Devin, what do you think about the defense pairings going into this season? Got a few new guys. What do you see it as coming out opening night?
I'm not going to be super creative on this one. Top pairing, I'm not going to touch it. You had Jake Wallman and Moritz Seider together last year. I think that you can enter the season with that and feel pretty good about it. If they lose that spark they had last year, you can move things around, but I see no reason to break that up to start. On the second pairing, I would have Shane Gostisbehere. I would have the new guys together. I would have Shane Gostisbehere and Justin Hall together. I think that, both of those guys have played top 4 minutes in the past. Gostisbehere needs to have the opportunity to put up points. That's what he does best. And if he's kind of stuck on the bottom pairing, he's not going to get same amount of time. Plus, he's basically stepping into the hole that Filip Hronek left, and that means he's going to be in that second pairing. That's where Hronek was. And then Hall. Hall was playing top line minutes in Toronto, and you can discuss how good he was in that role. But second pairing next to Gostisbehere, I think that is a nice little nice pairing. I think that they even each other out. Hall's better when he's the stay-at-home guy and not trying to do too much. And then third pairing, you've got Olli Maatta, and then I'd have Ben Chiarot on the right side. Chiarot has experience playing on his offside, so might as well lean into that. And they both Maatta and Chiarot were playing together towards the end of last season. Once Hronek was traded, and in the games that Edvinsson wasn't playing in, those two are playing together. So there's already familiarity, and obviously they just in general they played last season together, so there's just familiarity there too. So I think you stick the people with who they know, and then the new guys with the other new guy, because familiarity or lack thereof. And then as things progress, you can tinker with things, but I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel to start the season.
Yeah, I'm of the same. I think Wallman and Seider definitely stay together. They looked really good when they were put together last season, and you don't change something if it's not broke. Keep it going. And then the second pairing, I do agree with that. I think you do put Gostisbehere with Hall. It may change. You're looking at chemistry throughout the season, and they may not work together.
Yep.
But then you've got Maatta and Chiarot, like you said, played together. You don't change that, and they look pretty good together as well. Chiarot didn't look good with Seider, so I wouldn't even think about putting him back there. Places someone else. Either it be Maatta, or he does go on a pairing with Justin Hall. Maybe that could be a good pairing as well. But I do start the season. I'm not going to be very much creative either. I'm just going to go with the same as you, because I that's what I was thinking too. Because I wouldn't really change the two pairings that have played together. You don't want to do that. And then of course the new guys are going to be in the lineup. So there you go. There's your last two. and who's your seventh defenseman though?
I think right now, just based on who the top 6 are, I think it's Gus Lidstrom. I think I think he's like the perfect seventh defenseman, because he's coming into the season knowing he's kind of climbing up the hill to have a permanent spot. And he's not a young guy who needs to play. He's younger, don't get me wrong, but he's somebody who you can afford to sit for an extended period of time and then throw him in, and he's not he's not like a wild card per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I think Lindstrom is like like you say, the perfect seventh defenseman, because he can jump in. He can play. He's played quite a few games last season before, and now they've got new guys. So of course, he's getting pushed down the lineup. But definitely a guy that's not going to be complaining, I think, if he isn't in the lineup. So probably perfect.
And for what it's worth, he's a righty, and the Red Wings only have 2. If those pairings are what they are going to be, then they're short already. So Lindstrom gives them the option to have a third righty if they need to tinker with things.
Yeah, and injuries, of course, will happen. I mean,
Yep.
unfortunately, that's just the nature of the game. There's going to be injuries. So he'll probably get into the lineup more often than you think. And then you've got some depth. I think a guy like Brogan Rafferty may end up getting up here. He has some NHL experience. I know him from Vancouver here. He had some games here, but had a lot more hopes. I had a lot more hopes for him. But he's become a little bit of a good depth defenseman, and he was signed too. So probably play most of the time in Grand Rapids, but could be a good depth guy to come up and play that 7th, 8th-ish type defenseman role, depending on some of the prospects and stuff like that, right?
I know that you're the host, Matt, but I actually want to ask you a question. And maybe you just answered it there with Rafferty, but assuming that your 7 are the 7 that we talked about, who's your first call up? Is it Rafferty or is it somebody else?
Well, I mean, the thing of like experience, probably Rafferty's your guy, but you got guys down there like William Wallinder, Albert Johansson. I mean, I think of the young guys, it's Johansson is the guy that I would call it first. But if it's like a guy that you just kind of want to throw in and not worry about, I think Rafferty could be. Like I said, he has a bit of NHL experience, but this is going to be based on merit too. I always look at that. If they're playing really well in the minors, you call up that guy rather than the quote unquote veteran that, So, I mean, if Johansson's playing better than Rafferty, then definitely the guy. So maybe I didn't answer the question, but if it's a young guy and a prospect, I would go with Johansson as my first call up, but I think it's more based on the merit of who's playing well.
I like that hot take. Johansson over Edvinsson. Ooh.
Again, based on who's playing better. But I mean, I'm also looking at how Edvinsson's going to be injury wise, like he's still rehabbing.
Yes.
So I mean, I think the first call up is going to come before he's healthy. So I think that's what I'm taking into account. So
sure.
Before people jumped out, I wrote it in the comments. But if he's healthy, I think he's probably the first one, but I'm not sure when that'll be. I'm hoping that it's going to be early in the season because that's what it looks like the timeline is, that it's going to be early. But he may not be in training camp the way it's looking right now. But fingers crossed he is, because I think he, well, hopefully, because he looked so good in the NHL last season. We want him in. We want him here. Okay, well, let's move to the goaltending, and this is probably going to be an easy one, pretty quick. But there is some questions on backup for the backup goaltender, because there's 2 guys that have NHL experience in there. So, Devin, who's your starter? Who's your backup coming in?
My starter is Sebastian Cossa, and no, I'm just kidding. It's Billy Husso. Who else is it going to be, right?
Yeah.
Husso's coming back to start, and I think that I would even go as far as to say that given who they signed, the 2 goalies that they signed, I think Husso's set up to play a lot this season too.
Yes.
Not so much a 1A, 1B situation in Detroit anymore. I think it's definite starter backup. Now who the backup is going to be, I think that at least the first look, opening night of the season, which is what we're talking about here, is James Reimer.
Yeah.
He's getting paid more than Alex Lyon. I think that means something. And also, let's face it, Reimer's been in the league for a while. He's been there, done that. He's more than capable of filling a backup role. Good veteran to have around the team too. I think, unless some crazy stuff happens in training camp or in preseason, all signs point to Reimer being the backup.
Yeah, the thing is like, I think I said this on a previous episode that I think Lyon's going to ultimately be the backup because of the way he played at the end of last season. But I do agree with you. I think Reimer's probably the first choice as a backup when to start the season, because his paycheck is a lot higher and he has a lot more veteran experience to be that backup that doesn't necessarily have to play a lot to be good. I mean, he's probably gonna be sitting for weeks on end, and then you're gonna throw him in, and then he's like, Lyon may not be the good guy to be that, because he is a younger goaltender. I think he probably has to play a bit more to be effective because he's not used to sitting for long periods of time and then coming in. Reimer is a bit more for that because I think in San Jose he wasn't really used as the starter. But I mean, I think ultimately he'll probably start as the backup. But I think Lyon's going to impress enough in the minors to get called up and then take over from Reimer eventually because I think he's got a bit more upside.
And I do kind of want to tack onto that too. I don't think it's really that crazy to suggest that Lyon is in the NHL at the end of the season and Reimer's in the AHL. And I led off with Reimer's getting paid more. Reimer's getting paid. Basically last season we saw firsthand that the Red Wings are not afraid to put a goalie getting paid in the AHL. And Delkovich spent most of the season in the AHL. So I think that if Lions forces their hand, I think the more they're completely fine with putting Reimer on waivers and letting Lyon be the backup. And I would even argue that maybe Reimer has a better chance of getting through waivers than Lyon does, not just because of the paycheck, but also the contract. Lyon signed for 2 years, whereas Reimer's only paid for 1. So if a team claims Lyon, they got a nice little, backup minor starter for 2 years. That's pretty good value on waivers.
Yeah, and he, like I said, he basically was the reason Florida made the playoffs because he had really good end of the season. And I'm correcting myself. Reimer played 43 games last season, so he was not technically a backup in San Jose. Probably closer to a 1A, 1B type thing with Kakkonen, I believe, was there.
Yep.
The other goaltender. But so I mean, Reimer has a lot of experience in the NHL. So as a backup, I think he's probably good stopgap. But I don't think he's going to play a ton. I think, like you said, Husso's going to be playing a lot of the games, and he's going to have to be ready for it because he's probably going to end up playing a ton this season. So hopefully he's up for the challenge.
I imagine they probably want Reimer or Lyon or whoever the backup is to play like around 30 this season.
Yeah, that's a good number, I think, for sure. Okay, well, there's our defense and goaltenders. Not much creativity on our part, but I mean, it's probably what everyone's projecting at this point of what I don't think there's any surprises. But let's get to our off the rush question. And you asked me that question. I'll ask you. Who's your first call up from the defense if an injury happens or someone's not playing well, whatever?
In a vacuum where I don't have to think about other things, it's Simon Edvinsson because I just think he's like he already showed in the NHL he could at least survive. I'm assuming he'll be even better this year. Plus, like we said some weeks ago, he was picked 6th overall 3 years ago now. At some point you got to start, making that pick make sense, for lack of better phrasing. But as we all know on this show, I'm a huge Albert Johansson fan. Yes. So in this reality where I do actually have to think about other things, Johansson's the guy. And for what it's worth, Sean Horkoff, Griffin's GM, said at the end of the Griffin season that he, before his injury, was probably playing himself into a call-up. So it's not just kind of wishful thinking on our part. He was pretty darn close to getting that call-up.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, follow up to that question. Sebastian Cossa, how many games in the NHL do you see next season, or does he even get called up?
I think he could get called up. I think it would be towards the end of the season if the Red Wings have control over the matter. I don't think they'll be in a rush to get him in the NHL, even if he's like playing lights out in the AHL. I think they'd be content to just let him thrive at that level than to throw him up into the NHL where he's not ready for it. But if circumstances allow it, I would not be surprised if they let him get a game or two.
Does he get his first win?
Yes, because I imagine that they'll be game planning around the idea that they have a rookie in goal. So it'll be probably one of those games where Cossa only faces like 20 shots because they're playing lockdown in front of them.
That'd be ideal. Not like
Yeah.
how Mikey DiPietro in Vancouver got thrown into.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still think that messed up his development, but that's not a Detroit question.
And that's case in point though, why I think they would prefer just to let him do his thing in the AHL this year because, one, you put him at the NHL and then it gets lit up, and what does that do,
Confidence or goaltender mentally, it's not something you want to risk. Okay, well, before we get to our new segment, let's pay the bills. And here's a message from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
Okay, well, this is a Paradox Destroyer segment, so we should have like the theme song or something. Common Corner, brought to you by Paradox Destroyer. This is a new segment we're going to start in the next, how many teams are in the Atlantic?
7 weeks, so basically right up until it's time for hockey. Let's
There
go.
Perfect. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the Atlantic Division and compare the Red Wings to whatever team we're looking at and the different positions and seeing how they match up. And that'll ultimately look at how they potentially maybe make the playoffs, because if they're better than a lot of these teams, then maybe they do. So we're going to start with the Florida Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup finalists. They were in the Stanley Cup final this past season, so they're probably the one to beat, maybe, to come up. There are a lot of good teams in this division, as we'll find out as we go through this. So let's start with the Florida Panthers, though, and focus on them. And we're going to start with, we'll start down the middle, because I think that's a really important position. So, Devin, where do you see the Florida Panthers and the Red Wings at their down the middle, how they kind of match up?
Well, the prevailing thought, I'll just start with kind of an overall thought here. The prevailing thought I have about the Florida Panthers versus the Red Wings is that the top of Florida's lineup is better than the top of Detroit's lineup, at least on paper, or at least kind of going off of last year. But then as you kind of get down the depth chart, that's where things even out and maybe even go into Detroit's favor. Alexander Barkov is one of the best two-way centermen in the league, if not the best, now that Patrice Bergeron is retired. He's their captain. He's like not just one of the best two-way players, but just one of the best players, period. So, as much as we all love Dylan Larkin on the show, he's not quite at that caliber. So just, Barkov versus Larkin, you got to go Barkov. And then second line center, if I'm not, it's Sam Bennett.
Yeah.
And that, I think it's where it gets kind of comparable. The Red Wings second line center is probably going to be Andrew Kopp or JT Compher, one of the two. And between the two of them and Sam Bennett, I mean, take your pick, really. I don't really feel too strongly one way or another about any of those three. If anything, maybe Kopp and Compher, because they're a bit more versatile in terms of where they can play in the lineup. But as centers, which is what we're taking them as, whatever, take your pick. And then the last center I really want to focus on here is Anton Lundell, because he kind of had a coming out party in the playoffs during the Panthers playoff run. A lot of people that were paying attention to him in his draft year and then even in the years following, they knew this kid was going to be good. In fact, like some even called him like a Barkov 2.0. So it was really kind of cool that Panthers got him. And then he really started to show that in the playoffs. I think the Red Wings have a guy that could be at Lundell's level. The guy I'm thinking of is named Marco Kasper.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with that is we don't know if Marco Kasper is going to be in the Red Wings lineup. And even if he is in the Red Wings lineup, he's probably at least a step or two behind Lundell, just based on, Lundell's older than Casper, so he's had more time to develop and more time in the NHL and blah 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 blah. So as it is, I think you got to lean Florida when it comes to the centers. But I don't think it's as like I don't think it's like a slam dunk victory for Florida. I think it's actually fairly close, but Florida does take it here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think Barkov and Larkin, like Larkin's a really good centerman, but Barkov is he's just so good in that two-way game. And maybe he'll win some Selkies now that Bergeron is out of the
Yeah.
Maybe someone else have a chance. Because he's Bergeron had 6 wins, record 6 wins of that trophy. So I think everyone else that had a chance at it probably like, yes, maybe I'll win it this time. But Barkov definitely is always in the running to be winning the Selke. So yeah, between the two, I think Barkov definitely has the edge. Like you said, I think the other centermen are kind of a wash, really. And Bennett's a good centerman, but I mean, I think they're probably around the same as what JT Compher. Maybe he's a bit better. Lately, he's been a lot better. But Lundell's the wild card. I do agree. I think he's a burgeoning Barkov personally.
Yeah.
Because he's got the same type of game. Very good two-way player. And he's only 21. So he's got a lot more development still to go. And what do you know? They're both Finnish. So all right. Well, let's get to our wingers. We're not going to go left wing, right wing, because all these guys seem to play both sides. So, I mean, when you look at the wingers, it's kind of hard to differentiate. So what do you think about their wingers compared to the Red Wings?
Well, again, you start at the top, and I think that Florida's got the edge here. And then as you get down, it starts to go towards the Red Wings a bit more. Matthew Tkachuk is their top winger, and Matthew Tkachuk is, depending on who you ask, like a top 10 player in the NHL. Obviously he may very well have won the Conn Smythe Trophy if the Panthers had won the Stanley Cup. The Red Wings don't have a winger quite like that. They just don't. And that's not to say that the wingers they have aren't really good. Lucas Raymond, Alex DeBrincat now, they're all gonna, really, boost the Red Wings lineup and provide a lot of offense. Matthew Tkachuk is just a different animal. Every team wishes they had a Matthew Tkachuk. Sam Reinhart, it kind of depends on what Sam Reinhart we're talking about here, because there's the really, really good Sam Reinhart that is who Florida traded for. I think he had like 70 some odd points his first season in Florida. I might be completely making that up, but I know 80. He had 80, even better. Even better. I know he had a better first season than a second season. So when he's good, 82. He's really 82. There you go. Yeah. Point per game. When he's good, he's really, really good. When he's bad, he's kind of invisible. And you could maybe say like that's basically Lucas Raymond right now, and maybe where Lucas Raymond's going to be in like 2 years. Because when Raymond's really good, he's really, really good. When he's bad, you see him get muscled off pucks, and it's like, this is it even trying? Like, and then you have like Carter Verhaeghe, who's still one of like the biggest like value players in the league. Really solid depth there. I think that's I don't know if the Red Wings have anyone that I can compare that to. That's like David Perron, but not Perron, because Perron's older and like that, I don't know. But like that type of thing, like depth winger that like just does everything you need him to do. But then, as I kind of said, as you go down lower into the depth chart here, you got the Panthers have a lot of guys that will play physical and can maybe chip in the odd goal and point here and there, but most of their production is going to come from their top 6. Whereas the Red Wings, we were talking about last week when we were doing our forward lineups, a guy like Jonathan Berggren could be on the 4th line, just based on the depth chart. And Berggren, I don't think he's a bottom 6 player per se. I think he's very much a top 9, top 6 guy. It's just the sheer amount of wingers that Detroit has. I think the Red Wings have good physical guys like the Panthers have, whether it's Rasmussen, Soderblom, and others. But it's just one of those things where, as Robbie Fabry, I talked about being on the fourth line, David Perron potentially being on the third line, so on and so forth, right? There's guys they could call up. So, not to repeat myself too much here, but top six, Florida, bottom six, Detroit. Like, and it's, yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I think, you're looking at both teams. It's like, yeah, the Red Wings have a lot of skill in their top six, and the Florida Panthers do too. But like you said, Tkachuk is just so much better than a lot of the players in the NHL. He brings such a different type of game too. I mean, it's not like he can be a finesse guy. He can be a power forward. He can be both. I really actually compare him to like Todd Bertuzzi in his prime, that type of guy that you just can't stop. I mean, he can do almost anything, and you really can't stop him. And that's what he showed in the playoffs. That's what he showed most of the year. Another 100-point season there too. The Panthers just have a heck of a player, and that's a guy that can carry your team when the other guys aren't. And then you got, we already talked about Barkov, but Verhaeghe's a very underrated player. I mean, he played so well in the playoffs, and again in last year's playoffs too. So I mean, it is tough. I think the top six, like you said, I think the Panthers have a better top six. Bottom six is where it kind of gets different, because there are some similar players. You got toughness on both teams. You got some unknowns coming in as well. You got Evan Rodriguez in Florida, who knows how he's going to play there. He's had a couple good seasons. Who pretty good in Colorado, and then really good in Pittsburgh. So I mean, who are they going to get there? And even with Reinhart, like 82 points, he quietly scored 31 goals last season, though. I didn't think he scored that many. He actually scored 31. But not as many assists on that one. So I don't know, was the wingers not, or whoever playing with, not scoring as much? But who knows? Didn't get as many points, but he almost got as many goals. So maybe he didn't have a struggle of a season that we thought. But Reinhardt he can be a bit of again another wild card. Who knows what he can do? But I think overall I do agree with you. Just to repeat again. Okay, defense. And this is where it could get a little muddy on both. You're looking at their top defensemen in Florida. You've got arguably it's Ekblad still. I think Ekblad is maybe not arguably. He is their top defenseman. Brandon Montour is a very underrated defenseman as well. I mean, he had such a good season last year. What, like 67, close to what points? 60, 70 points or something like that. And I should just keep having their stats thrown up here. Lost it. There it is. 73 points. Yeah, I was close. 73 points from Mahura. I mean, that's not Mahura. Montour. What a season that is for a defenseman that really hadn't done much before that. He only had 37 points previous season, and then highest was 37 points before that. So kind of broke out. So it's going to be unknown what he can do again this season. But ultimately, I think, before I throw it to you, I think the defense for Florida is better than the defense for Detroit. I mean, is another unknown in there, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who they signed. Who knows what he's going to be? I mean, he wasn't very good in Vancouver in the last couple seasons, but in a new environment, different expectations, maybe he turns into closer to the defenseman that was in Arizona, which he was really good. So what do you think about the Florida defense compared to the Red Wings?
I think what it comes down to for me is just the sheer number of unquestionable quality guys in each lineup. You talk about Ekblad, Montour, both of those guys are like, at this point, everybody agrees that these guys are great defensemen. They, you expect them to be top four guys for Florida for the foreseeable future, at least. And then you even have a guy like Gustav Forsling, who's pretty good, that is a bit underrated. Ekman-Larsson can definitely return to form under the right circumstances. So yeah, they have good bets, right? Like even if everyone else in their roster is just like not that great, Ekblad, Montour, Forsling, and maybe even OEL, that's a decent enough foundation to get the job done. And a lot of their guys that they still have too are like they were there last year when they made a run to the Stanley Cup. So like they clearly have at least a decent mix on the blue line, right? Whereas you look at the Red Wings, and we all like even people who don't cheer for the Red Wings agree Moritz Seider's a keeper. He's really good. People who pay attention to the Red Wings will agree that Jake Wallman's really good, especially next to Moritz Seider. He's not necessarily an NHL household name yet, so I don't know if you can put him in the same category as like a Montour. Maybe a step down, or maybe even two steps down, but give it time. I'm sure Wallman's going to be a household name before long. But then that's pretty much it, right? Like Gosh Despair puts up points, and is maybe a little underrated defensively, but like that's not his calling card. Justin Hall, if you ask Maple Leafs fans, will tell you that he is like a traffic cone to be more effective than him. And then Mata and Sherratt are both fine. Mata was obviously a really pleasant surprise this past season for the Red Wings, earning an extension along the way. But like, let's be honest here. Like, Mata's not like a top pairing guy. He's maybe not even a middle pairing guy. He's just a really solid defender that you can plug into your lineup and not worry about. And Ben Sherratt is a player who's good if he's used correctly. If he's used incorrectly, we have what happened last year where he was paired with Seider and it like tanked both of them.
Yeah.
So for me, I count 3, maybe even 4 really good defensemen on Florida. I count 2 in Detroit, and maybe 3 if you want to include Gas Despair. But even then, that's still not enough to match what Florida's got going on.
Yeah, I'm looking at their depth chart here, and I'm like, where's Ekblad and where's where's Montour? Now they're both on the injured list. I'm cap friendly, that's why they're not there. But it's looking at they got Josh Mahura, who's a very underrated piece as well, I think. And then they added Dmitry Kulikov back as well. He's an okay defenseman. I don't know how much he'll play in Florida, but Nico Mikkola is another guy they have a lot of good defensemen for coming in this season, and we'll see how it all shakes out. But I do agree. I think the Red Wings have 2 legit, for sure, top defensemen. Seider's probably on par with like Ekblad, maybe in like top defensemen, but maybe not. Seider's not there yet. But he's close. I think he is close to being that type of a defenseman where he's definitely, Ekblad was the first overall pick. So
yeah. He's on his way, right? Like,
okay, goaltending. Husso versus Bobrovsky. I'm assuming Bobrovsky's going to be their starter because really they don't have anyone else. Spencer Knight is a bit of a wild card. I believe he was reinstated. So he will be in the mix and training camp. They also signed, I believe, Anthony Stolarz not that long ago.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, like today or yesterday. So Stolarz is also in the mix. So, and then we already talked about the goaltending earlier for the Red Wings. So what do you think matching up there?
Well, I think this is actually a really interesting one to compare. Both teams have a goaltending depth chart that's 3-ish deep, right? At least you project for this season. But what this comes down to for me is honestly Bobrovsky. And the reason why I say it comes down to him is because just like I said, there's 2 different versions of Sam Reinhart, and I think there's another player I said the same thing about too, but there's 2 versions of Sergei Bobrovsky. There's the Vezina winning one that helped carry the Panthers to the Cup final, and then there's the version of Bobrovsky that played in the Cup final. They are drastically different. They yield completely different results, and one of them is worth the $10 million price tag. One of them is not.
No.
And I'll say this too. Bobrovsky doing what he did in the playoffs. Ask anyone, they'll tell you that came out of nowhere. Like his tenure with the Panthers has been not the best. He's been like average pretty much his whole time in Florida, and then out of nowhere, like struck lightning and became his old self in the playoffs. So if he goes back to old or like Panthers Bobrovsky, this season, then this is pretty comparable, and I think you can maybe even say Husso's better than Bobrovsky. But if he's 2023 playoffs Bobrovsky, the Red Wings don't have anyone that matches that. Like not many teams do. Bobrovsky when Bobrovsky's at his best, he's one of the best goalies in the world.
Yeah.
Like point blank. So that's the difference. If he's really, really good, Red Wings can't compete. If he's average or below average, Husso is as good, if not better.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look down the depth chart, you've got Reimer, Lyon. Maybe you throw in Cossa too, just to like throw in a youth factor. And then you've got Stolars and Spencer Knight. Spencer Knight is also a really big wild card because, like you said, Matt, he finished the season in the players assistance program. You never know how a player is going to respond to that, how they're going to come out of it, and if they're going to look better or worse, or we obviously don't know all the details of what was going on there either. But he's obviously a highly touted prospect when he was drafted. They took him 13th overall, I believe, when they got him. So he's a highly touted goalie prospect. He has all the talent in the world to be one of the best goalies in the league. He's just got to get there. And you can say the same thing about Sebastian Cossa, but he's a bit further down the path than Spencer Knight is. As for Stolars, honestly, I think of Stolars pretty similarly to I think of Lyon. Where Stolars could be a backup. He also would be like a really, really good third goalie in the depth chart. And that's what I think of Alex Lyon, where he could be the backup, but he's a really, really good third goalie. And it's kind of funny too, because Lyon, obviously, as we have already said, came from Florida. So Reimer is I would say Reimer's better than Stolars. I would say more what to expect from Reimer than Knight. So maybe you give the backup position to Detroit, and the starter position is kind of a TBD. You have to see how Bobrovsky looks to start the season.
Yeah, Stolars looked pretty good in Anaheim on a bad team.
Absolutely.
So I mean, had not last season, but the season before, 12-8-3 record, and 2.67 goals against average, 917 save percentage, 3 shutouts. Last season, not so good, 3.73, 899 save percentage. But again, Anaheim Ducks weren't that good. So I mean, Stolars, I think, could be again that wild card as well, in Florida, who could potentially take over the backup over Spencer Knight, depending on how he kind of looks after coming out of the player assistance program. So, but if he is back to how he was before, I think he's definitely the backup, because he looked pretty good. Almost looked like he was going to be the starter over Bobrovsky early on there when Bobrovsky was struggling. So yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see how those two, Husso and Bobrovsky, kind of match up, depending on each of them, how they play, because Husso, we all know, can be a really good goaltender as well. So, and he looked ridiculously good at the beginning of the last season for the Red Wings. Thought that, maybe he'll carry the Red Wings to the playoffs, but kind of fell off after that. So we'll have to see if he can keep it going all season long. And if he does, he is definitely on par, or if not better, like you said, than Bobrovsky for sure. Okay. Well, that was a pretty big segment. So thanks for Paradox Destroyer for starting us off on that. And we'll get another team on the docket. Probably not next episode, but the episode after that, because we got our prospect rankings show. We'll see. If there's time, we may add that in, but we'll see. So stay tuned for that. Okay, let's get to our final comment corner question, which is from another frequent, frequent flyer on our comment corner plane, or whatever you want to call it.
Wings, they fly, right?
There you go. Frequent flyer Don, and he asked this question: how will Amadeus Lombardi and William Wallinder do this year? Devin, where was he ranked on your rankings? Off the top of your head. I don't know if you can do it off the top of your head.
11. He was 11.
11th. So 11th on the rankings. What do you think? How will they do this year?
Well, yeah, kind of a sneak peek here, a little plug for the rankings I just dropped today. We'll be discussing it more next week, but if you want to, be all caught up for next week's episode, be sure to check that out. I'm gonna be kind of rattling off more or less what I said about both of them here. I am really excited about Amadeus Lombardi. He's a really fast, really skilled player that brings you out of your seat. He's the type of player that's worth the price of admission. Fourth round pick. He was an overage pick. One of those guys that basically got overlooked because the OHL didn't have a season when the pandemic was roaring on. So that's kind of what happened there. And then when he came back, he's looked really good, and it sparked the Red Wings to draft him. When I look at Lombardi, when I think about him, I think about another fourth round pick of the Red Wings some years ago. I'm thinking of Andreas Athanasiou. Amadeus, Andreas, kind of funny there too. But Athanasiou, in case you are a relatively new Red Wings fan, was another really skilled, speedy center prospect that didn't have a ton to say in his own end, but like could bring you out of your seat with the things he could do with his feet and with his hands. And that's Amadeus Lombardi. For me to really get on board the Amadeus Lombardi hype train, choo choo, I need him to kind of continue what he did in the OHL, but in the AHL this season. He put up like 105 points this season, or this past season. I don't think he's going to do all of that in the AHL, but he needs to put up some serious numbers for me to like really buy into it. It's one thing to dominate the OHL in your draft year. It's another when you're in your D+2 year. So I need to see more of it before I can fully get on board. But I do think he's going to play well. He looked pretty good in his little brief stint towards the end of the year with the Griffins. But the AHL is a different animal, so he's just going to have to prove it. And then as for William Wallinder, he actually kind of he's similar to Edmondson in that he's got a big frame. He's like kind of mobile for his size, and he moves the puck well. He isn't afraid to chip in an offense. He's not afraid to pinch in the offensive zone. And in fact, his willingness to pinch sometimes gets him in trouble. And the play will go the other way, and he's caught back where he's not supposed to be. For him to really, start to make a name for himself as a top prospect for the Red Wings, and he already is, but he's got to prove at the AHL level that he can maintain that his offensive production and his offensive capabilities while also not hurting his team defensively. At the end of the day, he's going to be an NHL player if he's able to be functional in his own end while also spurring offense. So that's going to be the big thing for him, is just making sure that he's useful in his own end while not dulling down what he can do in his own end. I think that if Edvinsson makes his way to Detroit and stays there, Wallinder is going to be a big beneficiary of that. He's probably going to take on a role in the power play if Edvinsson's not there. And he'll also just take on probably like top 4 minutes that wouldn't necessarily be there if Edvinsson's there. So I think if anyone is going to be banging the desk that Edvinsson should be in Detroit, besides me over the last like month or so, it's William Wallinder, because Edvinsson's going to be basically in his way.
Yeah.
But I think they'll both look good. To kind of wrap this up in a bow here, I think they'll both look good. I would not be surprised to see growing pains out of both of them, especially Wallinder, given that he's going to be playing his first full season in North America. And I also wouldn't be surprised to see Lombardi get like shoved around a lot. He's going to be playing against grown men and players that have NHL experience. And that's a learning curve too. So I'm cautiously optimistic about them both. Wallinder is he's definitely a top 10 guy. I think he's 6 or 7 on the rankings. So he's definitely a top 10 guy. I'm very much high on him. Lombardi's just outside of that top 10, but if he shows well, he's going to be a top 10 guy next time I do a ranking.
Yeah, I'm excited to see both of them in the AHL. We should do a Grand Rapids Griffins preview because there's a lot of interesting prospects going to be playing in Grand Rapids this season. So that's going to be fun to watch the AHL as well. So stay tuned for that. We'll do a little preview for the Grand Rapids Griffins coming up. All right, off the rush. I want to go back to the Florida Panthers. Where do you see record-wise season series? Who wins the season series between the two teams?
Well, based on the conclusions we drew on their like lineup comparison, I guess you got to say Florida.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if Detroit takes it. Because it's close enough that thin margin of error. Excuse me. And then also like I talked about how it really comes down to Bobrovsky for me in goal. If he's not performing the way he did last year, and Spencer Knight isn't Spencer Knight of old, and Stolarz is just kind of okay. I can see Ville Husso and even James Reimer stealing a game. So I say Panthers, but the Red Wings could easily win it.
Yeah, it's gonna be close. I think it's gonna, factor in a lot of different things because who knows what happens throughout the season. You got injuries. Who knows what type of team they'll have at different points. So, but yeah, I do. I think I'll say the Red Wings will win the season series just to kind of make it a bit different, but it will be close for sure. All right, before we end the show, one final thing: predictions. Amadeus Lombardi, how many goals do you see him scoring in the AHL in his rookie season?
If this wasn't an off the top of my head thing, I would actually find like a comparable, and I'd be like, because of this guy, he's gonna score this much. I'm gonna say he scores 20 goals, maybe just under 18, 19, 20, somewhere in that range.
Good range. I'm gonna say he hits 20. I'm gonna be excited to see him play because I love how he's played in the last couple seasons, or since he was drafted. So yeah, 20 goals I think is a realistic. If he gets going right away, who knows what happens. Some players really struggle in the AHL to start because it's so much different than the OHL, than the junior league. So some bit of an adjustment period. So I'm gonna say he hits 20 though. And that, it's for William Wallinder. We'll do that too quickly. How many goals do you see him? He's a defenseman.
Yeah. Goals. If he hits 5 goals, that's pretty good. I'll actually just completely dodge the question and say he's gonna put up 30 points.
Yeah, and so that's already easier for the president. I'll say he hits. Yeah, 30 points is probably pretty good. That'd be a pretty good season for him.
Yeah.
So 30 points is a good one for that too. Okay. That's a good episode. Good to wrap that up. Thanks again for coming with us on another grind line. Had a new segment, so that's fun. We'll continue that either next episode or the episode after, whenever. But stay tuned for next episode because we will be going through Devin's latest top 25 rankings, which dropped as we're recording this morning. So if you haven't checked that out, check that out at thehockeywriters.com. It's a bit of a long read, but those are always long reads and they're great to read. So either you read it all at once or break it up, read one bit today, tomorrow, whatever. Give it a read. Or you just want to read one prospect, you can do that as well. But take a look at that at thehockeywriters.com and check out all the other articles that are at the Red Wings page on the Hockey Writers, because we've got quite a few coming out. I haven't released my second prospect spotlight, but that's coming up as well. I'm going to be doing Emil Viro, so look out for that. My favorite underrated Red Wings defenseman. I'm going to not say my favorite Red Wings defenseman because Simon Edvinsson is probably my favorite top prospect of defenseman, but Emil Viro, look out for him. So he's gonna be my next spotlight. Thanks, Devin, for joining another grind line. We'll hopefully have another person on our panel next week for our prospect look at that ranking. So I don't really want to just be talking to Devin. We need some more feedback coming in. So we'll hopefully have someone else on the show. And thanks everyone for joining us, and keep those comments coming in the comments section. And we will see you next time on another episode of The Grind Line.